Hello, everybody. Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, we're still, the NBA is still in the midst of its playoffs. The conference finals is starting up tonight with in the Eastern Conference, but that hasn't stopped the Toronto Raptors from making moves. And the Toronto Raptors have signed Nick Nurse to a multi-year extension, so that means Nick Nurse is going to be the coach of this Toronto Raptors basketball team for a long time to come. Riker?
Ben, I'm thrilled to hear this news because that means the Coach of the Year curse, it's broken. It was only a one-year thing, I guess, in Toronto, but I had my worries.
Sam Mitchell, too. He won Coach of the Year and then ended up getting fired.
Well, there you go. So, and I think he's very well-deserved. But, Ben, before we start this, we're so close to 15K subs, so if you're not a subscriber, we're going to plug it hard. Just go for that. And also, we're into the off-season now. Things are lighter. The mood is up. Maybe we'll start doing comment of the day or something. Not doing it now, but just tossing that idea out there, Ben. But let's talk about Nick Nurse, Coach of the Year.
Yeah, shout out Nick Nurse. This man, obviously, the Toronto Raptors, I guess it is a disappointing out against the Boston Celtics, even though it was a really toughly fought series, and some people have kind of went at him about some of the rotations he's played or not, but Nick Nurse is proven to be a playoff-tested, a regular season-tested coach and everything. He's currently the winningest coach of all time, obviously only coaching for 2 seasons, but with a winning percentage of 72%, 111 wins to 43 losses, that tops the rest of the league in NBA history, which is certainly a great start to your coaching career. Obviously, came into some great rosters, but also has a ridiculously high winning percentage in the NBA playoffs with about 66%, and won a championship his rookie year as a coach. Nick Nurse has done everything to deserve this. He's completely changed the way defense is played across the NBA with a lot more zones, box ones, different things, building walls against star players. The regular season against a team that really didn't have high expectations coming in from the mainstream media, took them over the top to have a strong playoff run and, almost make a run to the conference finals. I can't see anyone out here really saying this is a bad signing for the Toronto Raptors.
No, definitely not, Ben. And there wasn't even expectations that the Raptors could win after the Kawhi trade. Let's be realistic here. Nobody thought that they could get it done. And he comes out, like you said, rookie coach, and integrates a team that could have went the other way in terms of chemistry, in terms of making it all click, got through a couple of tough series in the Eastern Conference, made it all the way, obviously won the championship, even less expectations this year. And there was a couple games in that Boston series that the Raptors probably should have got sent packing early, but having Kyle Lowry, that whatever that inbound play was to win the game winner in game 3, the game where he switched out that small ball lineup in double overtime. I mean, to me, those games would not have been won had Nick Nurse not done something completely on the fly, tossed out a lineup he'd never even tried once during the regular season. This guy, I think he's widely credited as being a real maestro and really playing with lineups in a way that not a lot of coaches are confident enough to try. I totally agree, Ben. I would hate to see if anybody challenged this contract extension.
Yeah, I think so. I guess we can talk about maybe bring it back to the playoffs a little bit, because there definitely was some criticisms of Nick Nurse, particularly playing the deep bench and giving Matt Thomas more minutes and whatnot. But this extension is essential for the Toronto Raptors. Nick Nurse, Masai Ujiri, the front office, they're key pillars as to why having some sort of familiar faces, keeping the right guys around that have been successful, familiarity within the organization. Obviously, Nick Nurse, along with Dwayne Casey, was an assistant coach for about 5 years, so he's been around this whole entire run of Raptor success, and then took it to a whole nother level during that obviously championship run with Kawhi, and just maintained that level of focus amongst the team. That championship just attention, so the team didn't have lesser expectations. The defense stayed at even greater level, even after losing 2 guys that you're starting wings in Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard, who are great all defensive players. Just making sure everyone steps up with all the injuries and everything that's happened. Nick Nurse is the coach of this team, and I think he's going to be coach of the Toronto Raptors for a very long time, even beyond this contract extension.
Yeah, Ben, and that's I think very reasonable to say. Can you how long, how many years did he get extended? I haven't seen the specifics yet.
It hasn't popped up on. I creeped a bunch of articles. I don't know if the numbers have popped up specifically, but I'll keep looking as we podcast.
Fair enough. But yeah, no, I totally agree, Ben, because Dwayne Casey, he had a long runway, and he did some tremendous things, right? We can't take away from what Dwayne Casey's impact was in shaping this franchise, the Toronto Raptors franchise, bringing it, molding it into being a perennial playoff team that's, they've faced a lot of early playoff exits, but really that have asserted themselves in the mix of those top teams in the East, which is traditionally a very weak conference. And now what Nick Nurse has done is come in and elevated that even more. And so I think the expectations are, even if the Raptors don't do a lot potentially in the offseason, I think you'd have to make the argument that they should still be top 5, top 6 team, if not better. And I like the point that you brought up on defense, Ben, that he's a very good defensive coach. Dwayne Casey, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but his whole MO was that he was the defensive coordinator, one of the big defensive minds on the Dallas Mavericks team before he came over to the Toronto Raptors. And Nick Nurse has gone out there and one-upped them and done some crazy box and ones, done some full court presses, flash different types of zones. I think besides maybe the Miami Heat, the Raptors played among the most zone defenses in the league or in the NBA this regular season. So he's willing to try it all. And I think that really makes a difference when you don't have any superstars to rely on and you have to really will your just all-around good team to win game after game.
Yeah, and that was the thing about Nick Nurse, because Dwayne Casey's last season on the Toronto Raptors, if people remember, it was the bench mob year where the Raptors were the first seed, and then they had all the expectations to go up against LeBron James, Cleveland Cavaliers without Kyrie Irving. They still had Kevin Love, but that team was in complete disarray, and we really expected to make the finals that season with everything we were building up to, and then it was a very disappointing series, and we've talked about that to death in past years. But the reason the Toronto Raptors were really good that year, the reason they won 59 games was because the revitalization of the offense, right? It was the Nick Nurse offense people were talking about, assistant coach Nick Nurse, that really changed the game. And Dwayne Casey won Coach of the Year, and obviously that's not to take away from Dwayne Casey from that the fact that Nick Nurse's offense was the one that was integrated. Nick Nurse is the offensive coordinator, but it just shows his impact he's had on this team for that long. And then, so people questioned, well, we know he can coach on offense. Can he coach on defense when he signed with the Raptors or when he became the Raptors head coach? And as you brought up, the box ones, the full court presses, which really take teams off guard, and especially when the Raptors are trying to make a comeback. The defense on Giannis last season, the wall he's built, and we kind of, even in this just podcast, we're sort of raving about Nick Nurse, and I think everyone, you got to be wild as a Raptors fan if you don't think Nick Nurse should be the coach of this team going forward. But Ryker, I'm going to pose a little bit of a tougher question for you. We brought up how even though the Raptors lost to the Celtics, we think Nick Nurse did outcoach Brad Stevens, and two of those guys are regarded as the top dogs in the NBA. But do you think even with his short tenure, and maybe you got to be a bit more battle-tested to earn this title, but would you call Nick Nurse the best coach in the NBA?
Well, first of all, Ben, I don't know if Nick Nurse outcoached Brad Stevens anymore. I thought we talked about that after Game 6, because after Game 7, I thought that was just a dreadful performance. There was some things down the stretch that maybe influenced me in the opposite direction there, Ben, but we don't need to dig into that if we don't want to. But I still think he coached a pretty good series, and the players, for whatever reason, just couldn't get it going, couldn't get into a rhythm on offense, struggled in stretches on defensive end. But the question was, is Nick Nurse already the best coach in Raptors history? I don't know.
No, not Raptors history, the NBA. I thought it'd be a given he's in Raptors history, but...
Oh, you think it's a given? Even after only 2 seasons?
Well, he won a championship. He has the most playoff wins for a Raptors coach, even in just the 2 years. Like, he surpassed Dwayne Casey and Sam Mitchell and all these guys. I think he's definitely in Raptors history. I was saying in the NBA right now.
Well, okay, let me say it this way. If you put Nick Nurse on the Milwaukee Bucks, they would not have lost against the Miami Heat. That's for darn sure. There is no way that the Milwaukee Bucks would have got gentlemen swept, and they would have won that series. I can make that statement. Would he be the best? I don't know, because you look at the top teams coming out of the West right now. I don't think any of them are tremendously coached. Well, specifically the LA teams. When you have that much star power, and I think he's up there. I think he's up there among good coaches. But Ben, I'm going to toss the question back to you. If it's a given that he's the best Raptors coach of all time, and you put him on that DeMar DeRozan Toronto Raptors team, would he have had more success than a Sam Mitchell could have had or a Dwayne Casey would have had? Would he have been able to get past that hurdle that is LeBron?
That's interesting. Now, Nick Nurse, because he was he was named coach of the Raptors a month before the Kawhi trade happened, and he was bringing up a lot of things that he wanted to do with that roster, that DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry led roster, and he brought up a lot of really interesting things that I liked. And what he firstly wanted to do was get DeMar to be more of a primary defender, really just unleash him as an on-ball defender and make him focus on that area, because that was probably obviously the biggest hole in DeMar's game was the three-point shooting, and we saw DeMar really take his three-point shooting to another level his final season with the Raptors, and then Greg Popovich really put that back into the bottle, but he was never like obviously a tremendous three-point shooter, but still he ended up shooting them and was at least a threat in some games out there. But he wanted to make DeMar more of a primary defender. He was talking about running that small ball with not having Serge Ibaka and Jonas Valanciunas out there on the court at the same time, which I think that's obviously clear that makes a lot more sense. Running Serge at the center completely revitalized his career. So I don't think we get swept. I don't think we get swept by the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think we win that year that LeBron didn't have Kyrie Irving, but I think it's less of a mockery. LeBronto doesn't happen. It's more so, even if we lose, I think it's more so in the vein those Pacers teams lost to LeBron in Miami, where 6-7 games, you don't really know which way it's going to go. But I think with Nick Nurse as head coach, we definitely win that final series against LeBron.
Yeah, and because that was a big criticism that we had during that playoff stretch, was that Dwayne Casey seemed very stuck to his one lineup, right, to his
like
one particular rotation, and we had a lot of criticisms that it wasn't working. And I think Nick Nurse has proven over the last 2 years that he's willing to change things up if they're not going. But then the caveat with that is I really thought we tried to play through Pascal Siakam too much in this Boston Celtics series, and I wonder if Nick Nurse would have slipped into the same sort of rut if he was the DeMar DeRozan Raptors coach.
That's a fair point, but I don't think that was that bad of a decision because, even as poorly as Pascal Siakam was playing, he did make some solid decisions in terms of posting up and then making some passes out. It was really just glaringly obviously poor down the stretch of games, when particularly in game 7 when they had Williams on him, and then he drive in, he get a lane, he get a look, he even made a couple layups, and then he just passed it straight to Marcus Smart or someone. So I guess at that point I agree, but I don't mind him rolling with his big guns, especially where Siakam's been so good all regular season. You'd expect him to turn it around at some point, but I don't know, the different lineups he threw out, the adjustments in games, in series, inter-series, it was just a whole nother level from what we've seen from others Raptors coaches. I think, in terms of debating against other Raptors coaches, I don't think it's a real legitimate debate there, even with how Dwayne Casey sort of built the culture, because I think Dwayne Casey's clearly the second best coach. Would you agree with that statement?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, Dwayne Casey's clearly the second best coach, but Nick Nurse has even passed him in playoff wins already. Obviously, he did have a stronger roster with Kawhi Leonard being on the team. That's obviously clear, but the way he was able to maneuver this Boston Celtics series, because when the Raptors get knocked down 0-2, they continue doing the same sorts of things. The Raptors were able to bounce back against the Celtics in this one. I think Nick Nurse, especially this year, over-surmounted Dwayne Casey in terms of greatest Raptors coach.
And it really makes you wonder, too, because the Raptors technically lost every home game in this series against Boston, and you really have to think, could they have won 4, or could they have taken even just that 7th game? Would fans have made a difference, right? Or would they have even been able to win in the what TD Garden? What is the Boston Celtics arena called?
Yeah, TD Garden.
TD Garden.
Toronto Dominion Bank.
Yeah,
in Boston.
That's so funny. But obviously, there's an asterisk on, for the most part, every series, this entire bubble. But there was other factors. But I agree. Nick Nurse, definitely, he has shown that he is a mastermind of a coach. I love the contract extension. I think he's up there for best coaches in the NBA. And it's unfortunate that he probably gets overlooked in the same way that players on the Toronto Raptors get overlooked when even they have the second best record in the entire NBA. None of the guys really get the accolades until they're down to the final couple of series, and even then everybody says they have no chance of winning. So I think Nick Nurse, I'm glad that we were able to keep him on, because he would have went and become a real threat on another team if they had to let him walk.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure even without the numbers in front of us, I'm sure he got paid big time for this contract. And I guess we've sort of jumped around the answer, and we'll throw it in the title. So are you saying that you don't think Nick Nurse is the best coach in the NBA yet? Or would you say he is over guys like, I guess the other competitors would be Brad Stevens, Eric Spoelstra, Doc Rivers, some people have up there. Greg Popovich is a guy that's obviously had the most historically greater career undisputably in the NBA right now. Would you put him over those guys in today's NBA? Steve Kerr's another guy.
I don't think I would yet, Ben, because, and you know why? It comes down to, I think the Raptors should have won that Boston Celtics series. And he made sure that they made it to Game 7, but I thought, I don't know. I had some issues, like I said, down the stretch with that Game 7, and maybe it wouldn't have been a coaching thing at all. Maybe it was written in the stars that the Celtics were going to win that one just based on the way the Raptors were playing. But I'm going to reserve my, awarding him of that title until another season's under his belt.
So who are you putting over him right now?
You could put any of the ones that have had a longer tenure and equal as much success with good teams.
That's fair. That's a fair point. I don't know. I'm obviously, we're both Raptors homers, but I like to go all out. I'd call him the best coach in the NBA right now, just because of what he did with this roster and all those sorts of things. But if you make the case for an Eric Spoelstra, Brad Stevens, I'm not going to debate with you. It's Nick Nurse needs a bit more of a leash to really supplant himself as that title, and we'll see next year, especially with the Brooklyn Nets getting KD and Kyrie coming in, the Wizards bouncing back in a tougher East, how the Raptors perform, and I'm sure the roster will look little bit different next season, and see how far we make in the Eastern Conference playoffs next year. Maybe with Giannis, maybe not. We'll see. Definitely check out that last video if you haven't. But you guys are the best for making this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Let us know down below if you think Nick Nurse is the best coach in the NBA, or if you disagree with us on our point that he's the greatest coach in Raptors history. Riker, you have any last words?
We got a lot coming up, Ben. A lot of videos. It's going to be a good offseason.
Yeah. Nice whiteboard full of videos.
Dude, you got to put that up on the screen. Hilarious. See if anybody can decipher your writing.
True.
Cheers.